As we get started again, the topic of discussion today is in regards to the post-election status in our particular realm of education. And so we want to focus again on the crisis communication resources that are available for you with regards to channeling student activism into student leadership. And so with that being said, today's outcomes are that we want everyone to understand the current reality for students in education and society. We also want to obtain some best practices related to the post-election challenges for students and the school community. And also, we would like to gain an understanding of the support and resources that are available for educational leaders. And so with this, again, ACSA is so excited to embark upon the work around educational equity and really supporting our leaders in closing the educational gaps that exist in our schools. And so again, if you're just joining in, again, I'm Nicole Anderson, the Diversity and Equal Access Executive. I'm joined by Dr. Alia Mahone from the Next 50 Years project. And so as you'll notice on the screen, we have to recognize the school systems that exist at this point. And so on the screen, you'll notice that we often talk about equity, equality, and the differences and really what we want to focus on in terms of closing the gaps. But we also have to realize that there's a reality right now. And the reality is that there are kids in the school system that are not necessarily receiving the services that they need. And unfortunately, historically, our school system has not always served all of our students well. So when you think about some kids who are not being served well, they often are shown in these different educational gaps that we see. And so I want you to just think about who those kids are, because they often are those same kids who are responding to some of the things that have happened in the media recently with regards to the post-election results. And so our current reality is that those kids who are often speaking out are very frustrated by a few things. And so some of them are that they are impacted by poverty and trauma. As well, they are coming from these diverse backgrounds that often differ from their staff and faculty. So sometimes there's a disconnect with regards to the cultural experiences. Also, they experience inequities with regards to resource distribution. I mean, some kids really are going to schools that facilities are not necessarily as nice and as resourceful as others. They may not have as high quality staff. And we often see this with regards to how that really has impacted these educational gaps and those access gaps as well. And so the other reality is that they're impacted by this presidential election, which has really, unfortunately, sparked some hatred and anger and fear amongst our kids. That is a reality, regardless of how we feel about the particular position politically that we may hold. But there is a reality that kids are having an emotional reaction to it. And so the other real reality for us is that they also lack exposure and understanding to culturally relevant instruction. And they may also even lack the skills on how to self-advocate effectively for social change. And with regards to the classroom, I think we all, are very aware that we really need to focus more on professional development that supports our teachers in the classroom, our leaders, but in particular, really helping us to connect students' cultural backgrounds to the instructional experience that they have in the classroom. And sometimes this disconnect makes it really tough when it's time to respond to things that are very cultural in nature. And these elections, I think, have really shown that. And so I want to introduce Dr. Alia Mahone from, again, 50 Years project, and have her walk us through some practical steps and thoughts about these post-election communications and responses that we need to consider. Thank you, Dr. Mahone, for being with us.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for inviting me. I am so happy to be here. Hello, everyone out there. I'll just say a little bit about myself very quickly. It's the Next 50 Years project that I founded and represent today. And I want to say that in the first 50 years of the civil rights movement, as we called it, we know that there were many things that got done. There was a lot of progress that was made, and some people disagree with that. but we realized that a lot of that progress was legislated. There were laws and rules that were put in place, but people's hearts and minds have not necessarily been changed. We can see evidence of that every day as we watch the news, especially during the campaign, and sometimes now with the reaction that young people are having in our schools, we can see that they recognize that the hearts and minds have not been changed in their lives and in their life circumstances. So the Next 50 Years project is about assisting, facilitating, supporting, doing everything that we can to train, educate, inspire that shift in consciousness. So I just wanted to say that. And we start off by knowing that every school site is different. So the statement that I received from Nicole the other day when we decided to do this, it was very short notice, it's about your school. So what happened in your school community? Some young people actually walked out of their school, walked out of their classrooms. They may have actually demonstrated or gathered in a place on the school campus. Some of them actually went out into the streets. Some of them talked about things in their classrooms. And some of them just simply had feelings privately and maybe talked to each other. But the question is that you want to find out what happened in your school. What's happening with your students, what's going on with them, because this is a very significant time in our country, but in particular, it's a very significant time in a young person's life, because they're looking at their future, and their future is our future. They're going to be our leaders. Some of them are leaders already, and so I just wanted to say that. So again, what happened in your school? And we're not actually having interaction this morning, so that's kind of a rhetorical question. But I want to give you 10 points of support. And actually, we vacillated between 9 and 10 points this morning, but we're going to constantly add more. We're going to update them and make them more relevant as time goes on. So let's start with those 10 points of support. I'm actually just going to read from the PowerPoint that's in front of you as it's in front of me. So, and I'm going to talk a little bit about each point. So the first and most significant point, at least in my mind, is to ensure students and their families feel safe and, most importantly, respected. And when we use that word respect, we know that, let me just give an anecdotal story. I work a lot with restorative justice, and I work directly with youth when I do that. And in a community circle, they have to choose a quality or a value that they would like to be represented in the circle when we do those circles. And about 70% of the time, and this is no exaggeration, the students will write the word respect. In fact, in a circle, you may have 5 or 6 words written on a piece of paper that they want that value in the circle, and they all say respect. They really want you to know that they want you to see them, not only see them, but appreciate who they are. And the families, of course, particularly people of color, want you to see them and be able to receive who they are just the way they are. And that is something that sometimes does not happen in our schools. It certainly sometimes doesn't happen in our communities. And right now, there's a fear that it's not going to happen in our country. So letting people know that they're respected is very, very important. The next point in the 10 points is to provide a forum for student voices on the issues. And so in your school, depending on the grade level, depending on the environment, depending on what's available to you, what's accessible in terms of what you can utilize in this process, the gathering of information from students about how they're feeling is also key at this time. So that may actually be a school assembly. It can be a large group of people. Perhaps the entire school can come together and talk about it. But if that's not possible, it can certainly happen in classrooms. It can happen if you have academies, for example, or if there's a focus on a particular topic and there's a group of students who are always together. Whatever has to happen, depending on your circumstances, gathering information from the students about how they're feeling on the issues, making sure that you're capturing their voice. And what I want to add to that, and I know that you all know where I'm coming from when I say that, we are not just gathering information from students. We are asking them to join us as adults, as educators, as administrators, in what it's going to take to make the change. So what we're doing is asking them to tell us what they see, what they feel, what they think, but also what they might do to bring about positive change in a peaceful manner. And so those assemblies are not about, they're not rallies, they're not necessarily what I would call protests. They're gathering information and they're helping the students to know that we want their leadership. And in the beginning, there may only be a few students who are willing to show up as leaders, but the idea is to let them know that we want their thinking, we want their attention, we want their ideas, we want their time, we want them to actually help guide the process of making the positive change. And so going to the next step, and this is a very significant step as well, is to ensure that all staff, all educators, everyone there in your school community are properly utilizing restorative practices. And there's going to be some resources that we're going to make available to you from ACSA and many of the ACSA partners, like the next 50 years, about what restorative practices you can utilize, what that means. I realize that everybody may not be officially or formally trained in restorative practices or things such as trauma-informed care, but certainly you're trained in crisis response protocols. But here's what I want to say about restorative practices, just going back up to that phrase. Restorative means that the idea is about healing, correcting, and making right. So restorative practices are about healing, correcting, and making right. And that takes energy, and that takes effort, and it takes commitment, but it also just takes heart, and it takes things like, as I said, having people be able to air their grievances, but asking them to think about what they would do to actually transform the thing that they're complaining about into something that they would enjoy, into something that's going to be supportive, into something that's going to be more effective. So moving right along. Yes.
Apologies. I know as a panelist, I wanted to just pause for a second and make sure people were able to process. I know they're not responding per se, but you've done a great job of really pointing out some real key things that people can do that make a huge difference. As we move through, and I know we have some resources at the end, but as we move through, if you can briefly touch on some more points with regards to this support as we get closer to our resource.
Absolutely. Yes, I'm happy to do that. And actually, I was waiting for the slide to go to the next slide to progress. And so I'm reading because I'm in front of my computer, everyone. And I might, if we can just advance that slide, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, we're on the next slide. We're right there. They can see the next slide.
Okay. All right, good. And so assess the issues and needs of students and provide counseling and other support services. So what does that mean? I mean, on the campus, there's going to be resources that are already available, that are already there. But what we want to do is make sure that students know that we're with them, that we are actually seeking to understand what their challenges and concerns are. And we want them to know that there are those facilities, there are those people, there are those resources, counselors and others who can look at things with them and help them to make choices about what to do. Again, in a positive, peaceful fashion, but in a fashion that's going to bring about change. And of course, on school campuses, this is already happening, but we just want to point out that you want to always ensure student safety and to give them information about how to have peaceful action take place and to facilitate student cooperation. You know, a lot of times there's a call that goes out. Sometimes it goes out on their text, you know, the text messages, because young people are so connected with their technology. But we want them to know that there are protocols that need to be followed, that there's a way that they are protected if they're conducting a demonstration in accordance with the First Amendment, as an example, and there's a way that they're not protected when they're conducting a demonstration or an activity that's of protest that's not protected by the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, and so on and so forth. We also want to provide students with examples of effective advocacy and activism. In other words, we want to point to the things that we see in either currently that's relevant right now in our communities, those who are taking steps to make change, and they're doing it in a positive fashion. We want to have them emulate and model those things with their own ideas, incorporating into those ways of moving forward. And we want to look historically at what was done in terms of peaceful and effective activism. And so those things are available to us. That's actually a great assignment for some of the things that will be happening in classrooms academically, to have the students do research about what were the most effective movements, why were they most effective, and so on and so forth. And moving right along to the next slide.
So Dr. Mahone, one thing that I want to really point out also is in regards to students having those effective examples of advocacy and activism. And in particular, I think about some of the forums that actually exist as we speak already within the school system and within our society, in particular our school boards and where decisions are made. And so really, you know, we often see our seniors who take government and econ classes where they, you know, kind of have to go to school board meetings and really study the process. But I think also just pointing out the school boards in particular, those meetings are great places for kids to have their voices heard, and there's a process, and they can kind of learn that that is a much more effective way to have your voice heard and really impact policy and really share your concerns versus some, excuse me, some of the ways we've seen in the past week where kids have actually walked out and done things of that nature. And we also know about our city council and other organized forums for kids. And so I think our leaders can really do a great job of really helping to direct kids to that particular one. And so I just wanted to insert that thought, and we can go on to the next point.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you did, because that's very, very significant. And so the other thing is that the next point is to provide instructional support to connect the curriculum to students' experience. So what's happening now is that there is, as we spoke about in the beginning, as Nicole mentioned, there's fear. You know, students are not feeling as if they are seen, that their future is threatened, that they're not being, what their concerns and needs are not being reflected in policies or may not be reflected in policies in the future. And so we want them to know that even in the classroom, we want them to see reflections of themselves in the curriculum, in the topics that we discuss, in whatever the material are that you go over in classrooms, so that we are bringing the reality of their lives into their learning process. It makes them feel like this is relevant. It makes them feel like they are a part of what's taking place in terms of their education. It makes them feel like they matter. And having the students know that they matter, and again, letting them know that we're looking to them for leadership is a very important thing to be doing right now. And of course, in doing that, on your school campuses, you want to ensure that there's zero tolerance about policies and practices towards hate and violence. That if there are conflicts, if there are differences that will arise because some students may feel different than other students, that there is going to be no tolerance, absolutely no tolerance, zero tolerance of the expression of hate, of the use of violence, of those kinds of things that we know are going to disrupt and in fact be counterproductive to any kind of healing or things happening in a positive nature in terms of transformation and betterment. So I'm sure that you're already doing that. You don't need reminders, but we want students to know that they can come up with more creative ways of doing it. You know, once I had an anecdotal thing, I'll just say, students were fighting a lot on the school campus that I was working on at one point in time, and because it's kind of an activity. It's like, you know, there's going to be a fight today at 3 o'clock p.m., it's going to be at such and such location, and everybody's going to join that particular group of folks so that we can watch the fight. It's entertainment. I said, so why don't you actually use that model and have people come to that location at 3 o'clock or 3:15 after school, and instead of there being a fight, let there be something like a dance, okay? Let there be something like, I can't think of the model right now of what the students do and what actually adults do. I've seen this in New York, where they actually stage a kind of street play, and they actually speak about what they want changed, but do it in a creative and entertaining fashion. Somebody remind me. Yes.
One thing that I'm thinking about as we get closer to the end is thinking about, there are some moments on our campuses which I think our audience can really resonate with, where when we think about policies versus practices, there's one rule, but then there's the what actually happens. And so I know that we are seeing where students are making inappropriate comments. We have students who are bringing letters to school that are very inappropriate, you know, racially charged. And so when we think about some of these behaviors, sometimes our adults don't necessarily know how to respond, so they just don't at all. And I think that is one where we really have to think about, you know, these are times we really have to look at responding immediately to some of the things that are happening, really have a zero tolerance for this, because once one subtle thing happens, they will continue, and it's very hard to end those type of behaviors. And so I just want to kind of speak to that. And so I know we have 2 last points before we close, and so I want to allow you to finish those 2 and appreciate your time.
Okay, absolutely. And so the last 2 are to provide clear and timely messaging about current events. We want to actually talk about what's going on in the world today, what's going on in our community today, what's going on in the city today, what's going on in the country today. And we want students to really get engaged around sharing information about those current events. That we want them to learn about what really is taking place. What are the governmental processes? What are the things that move things forward? What are the steps that need to be taken? What are the roles and functions that people play that are our leaders, and so on and so forth. And moving right down to the last one, really, these are some talking points for the staff. These are some questions, which will be on the next slide, that you can ask as you start to implement the suggestions about this process that I'm talking about. So I'm going to specifically just read those questions. Question number 1, we want to find out how the students are personally feeling after the election. We want to ask them how they're feeling. We want to guide that conversation, of course, so that there isn't a lot of venting, and we don't want hate and violence, as I said before, even in speech, but we do want them to have a forum for talking about how they're feeling. Number 2, a question would be, what specific issue? We want them to pick one issue that they want to get behind and that maybe they want to lead on, that they're concerned about, that is, you know, in their lives and relevant to them regarding the election. And it's the ideas that people have about what the election is going to mean. Of course, we don't know exactly what's going to take place after January 20th, but we know that things are likely going to be different. But we want to know what their concerns are. So we want them to get specific and also have them take responsibility for what they're concerned about. Number 3, have them discuss the election, ask them if they've discussed the election with their parents and other family members. Have them know that it's not just school, that they want to have this in their lives, and if they start to involve their parents in what it is that they're doing, they're also probably going to at least monitor some of their behavior. Have they talked to their parents? They also want to get their parents' feelings, because parents are also concerned. This is a family-building conversation. This is a way for communication to happen in families that may not have happened before. The next point is, have they participated in any activism with their peers? And if they have, you want to find out what that activism is. And you want them to start thinking together about how to be more effective in their activism, how to actually do it in a way that's protected, and that's going to really move things forward. So you really want to find out what they've done already and maybe make suggestions and have them make suggestions to each other about how to do it differently in a way that's more effective in the future. Another question that you want to ask them is how they would like us, and that's the educators, the adults, how they would like us to support them here at school. What would they like us to help them with in terms of their priorities? Let them know that we're with them and that we are here, they're partners in what's needing to take place, and that we also are leaders. We're going to be partners together in this leadership role, and we want to know what specifically they'd like us to do. And when we let them know that we're with them, you may find that there's a change in the way that they see you as the person or the adult that they're having to interface with on a regular basis. This can be long-standing, in fact. And the next thing that I want to speak about is, have them think about if they were going to be a leader. So the question is, if you're thinking about becoming a leader to create positive social change, what are the specific ideas that you have about doing that? Let us help you in your leadership roles. Let us actually gather your thoughts and be able to put them in an effective manifestation of action that needs to take place here at school, in your life, in your community, and wherever else you'd like that to be. And essentially, you get the gist of what I'm talking about. We want the students to know that we expect their leadership. We're with them. We expect there's going to be appropriate behavior as we're making change. And I'm going to end with this beautiful quote that is not only just a quote that we learned from, but as a tribute to somebody who is no longer with us. Some of you may know already that a very well-known African-American reporter, Gwen Ifill, passed away recently over the last 2 weeks or so. And this is what she always said: my job is to bring light rather than heat to issues of importance to our society. And that message to young people is that we want them to bring light rather than heat to the issues of importance in their school, in their city, in their community, in our society, is how we're going to end it. And thank you very much, everybody that's here. Thank you very much, Nicole. Thank you very much, ACSA. Thank you very much, students, who I hope are going to be those leaders that we can look to and be proud of. And
we truly appreciate your time today and appreciate the support that you have given to our schools. Even I, benefiting working in Vallejo Unified School District and knowing that you did some great work for us, but all of the districts that you poured your energy into. So we appreciate it, and we'll include, of course, your information on our website in terms of people who would like additional support. You shared some great points, and those points, although they may be very they seem very simple, they actually are very deep and need a lot of attention, especially right now in terms of being very responsive to the crises that is actually existing in many of our schools at this time. And so I want to end our webinar with just reminding us as leaders, as we go out and do this work, we are dealing with post-election crises right now for many kids, and there is a reality there. But the reality is that we have a lot of educational gaps in our schools, and this is a constant battle. This is not new work. This is continued work. So I encourage you to continue to lead your work, but really focus with an equity lens, really define what it means, really look at what are the challenges that are existing, hit them head on, and have a plan, really have a plan. We really want to liberate our kids in a system that hasn't always been good to them. And so really we encourage you to reach out to us if you need support. We do have resources that we are, as we speak, loading onto our website. And so in the next 24 to 48 hours, you should see quite a bit of resources that will help you in terms of just addressing some of the current issues, but in general, just with regards to addressing the equity challenges that exist amongst our schools and districts. And so with that being said, we are wanting to invite you. We have monthly equity Twitter chats for those that like to have a chance to be on social media. Our next one is actually on November 30th at 1 p.m. And so you can follow us at ACSA_info, and I'd really invite us to all join in and have these conversations. We have plenty of professional development and lots of resources to support you. And we encourage you to look at just having a culturally proficient lens. We often do share that resource with our leaders who are on this educational journey. And much of the content around cultural proficiency really addresses these current issues that are going on. We have some real cultural conflicts going on in our schools right now. And so sometimes we just need some practical tools. And literally, you can find that in the cultural proficiency work from some of our partners. If you are in need of support with regards to communication, some of us have to respond immediately to the media, and we may struggle with what that looks like. My colleague and ACSA Communications Director and Public Information Officer, Naj Alikan, is available anytime. You see both of his phone numbers on the screen as well as his email address. If you need help with statements to the press, anything of that nature, please feel free to call or email Naj. As well, my information is here on the slide as well. Again, it's Nicole Anderson. And you can email me, you go to our website, again, follow us on Twitter and ACSA Equity on Facebook as well. And so again, we really appreciate you joining us today, and we hope that you will continue to look to ACSA to support your needs. Again, Dr. Mahone, we appreciate you in providing your insight today. And so Dr. Mahone's information is on the screen as well, and you can follow her and her organization. Feel free to email her as well. And we again appreciate our partnership and look forward to many more successful opportunities to provide resources to our members in ACSA. So we want to thank you all for joining us. We hope that you have a wonderful Thanksgiving vacation with your family. And we do always keep you in our thoughts with regards to the current condition right now, with regards to the post-election responses of our students and our adults. And so we wish you well, and have a wonderful weekend and Thanksgiving vacation with your family. Thank you very much.